pouring concrete in a small mixer today to make all the concrete, 6-to-1 ratio. We empty it out. We dump our concrete into this custom-built trough. We just tap them in with our hammer, and then later we'll be using our trowel to get a more exact level. Come up the side of this hill. That completes the first stage of our concrete pour.
Close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
In today's episode, we're going to go through all the process and procedures of pouring concrete into the forms we built in the last episode.
Take the wall you built to hide behind it all. We're all fighting wars no one knows.
We get started with making our concrete. We're going to be using our small mixer today to make all the concrete. Once our mixer's running, we've got to fill it with water. We want to put the right amount of water in, so we sort of have a mark on the inside to know the right level of water to add, so our concrete comes out in the right consistency later. I also wet the entire area around my mixer. This is something we're going to keep doing throughout the day to stop concrete sticking to it when it spills out of our system. With the right amount of water in the mixer, we start adding our sand.
Like a smoking gun, trying to find a reason, but I ain't got one. Taking me down, wash away the pain in the cold Montgomery rain.
For this kind of a foundation pour, I'm going to use a 6-to-1 ratio of Portland cement to the gravel sand mix. So I always start out with the water, then 3 shovel loads of the gravel and sand mix. Then we add our Portland cement. We're adding 1 shovel load of the Portland cement, but I do it in small pieces so it can mix properly in the mixer. I do little 1/4 shovel loads. The Portland cement is a very dense powder, and if you just put 1 full shovel load in by itself, it tends to stick to the back of the mixer. So it's important to add just a little bit at a time so it can mix properly.
Shape my destiny to be the best of me.
I'll stake my claim right here where I stand.
When your heart's done trying and your lungs run dry, there's nothing you can do when you can't deny.
We let the first half mix a little bit, then we add the other half of our gravel sand mix, 3 more shovel loads. Once we've got all the ingredients we want in the mixer, sometimes we add a little more water to get the consistency of the concrete that we want for our pour.
In the cold Montgomery rain.
We don't want the concrete too wet or too dry. By looking inside the mixer as it's going, you can observe the concrete peeling off or falling off the sides of the mixer. This is how we can tell when the mix is just right, not too wet and not too dry.
Doing everything that I can.
Here I'm just adding a little extra water to get it to the right mixture. When we're satisfied the concrete is mixed completely, we dump it into our wheelbarrow.
When your heart's done trying and your lungs run dry, there's nothing you can do when you can't deny. Every day ends up just the same in the cold Montgomery rain.
I use my foot to help stabilize the concrete mixer so it won't tip over as we empty it out into our barrow. This particular job site has very limited access to where the concrete has to end up. So the only way to get the concrete there in any practical way is to mix it out here where our materials can be dumped by the dump truck. and then barrow the concrete into the area where we need to pour the foundation. It's not uncommon to have restricted access to people's backyards, so I'm used to this kind of system. We dump our concrete into this custom-built trough.
It's all I ever see you do. Did everything you wanted to.
As a way of managing the concrete into our foundation system. This makes it easy for us to dump the wet concrete mix, and then from here we can shovel it through the trench system. Concrete is wet, heavy, and can be very messy, so this system was part of keeping control of all the concrete and getting it where we need to go, and using gravity on our side.
Take the wall, you build a high behind it all. We're all fighting wars, no one knows.
Getting all this concrete into our foundation is a bit like managing a river system. We dump the concrete at the top end of the system, and then we just keep manipulating it all the way through to the very end. Pushing all the concrete through this system with our shovel and rake also helps take all the air out of it and settle the concrete deep into our foundation for a really good engineering system.
When your heart's run dry and your lungs run dry, nothing you can do when you can't deny. Every day ends up just the same. In the cold Montgomery rain.
We got a beautiful sunny day for doing this foundation, so I'm just enjoying getting the concrete in after all the work we did with our excavation and building our forms. Many of the processes in construction can be quite tedious and repetitive, but if you relax and get into it and get into the flow, it can become quite an enjoyable meditative experience.
Take my hand, lead me to the promised land, where it's built to last, where the river runs.
We carefully push the concrete around all our rebar in the forms to make sure we get a nice solid concrete system for the foundation.
Keep staring at the sign. I'm running out of time.
I'm doing everything that I can
To shape my destiny, to be the best of me.
Once we have a sufficient amount of concrete in our forms, we trowel it off smooth and add the upright rebar pieces we're going to need for locking in our hollow blocks later. We need all the vertical pieces of rebar to fall in the center of our hollow block, so we've got to lay them out carefully to a measured system. I made myself a measuring stick with clear marks on it so I know how to lay out this vertical rebar in the right position. We just tap them in with our hammer to get them to the right depth so they're not all the way through the bottom of the concrete. With all the vertical rebars in the right position, we just touch it up with our trowel to smooth off the concrete.
Keep staring at the sign, but I'm running out of time.
I'm doing everything that I can.
Once we've got our foundations filled at this end of our trench, you start working on the other end of the foundation and filling that with concrete. As I mentioned earlier, access to backyards is often difficult. I often have to engineer some system of getting my heavy materials into where I need them. In this particular case, we're actually building an access ramp for the backyard.
In the cold Montgomery rain, walls ringing like a smoking gun, trying to find a reason, but I ain't got one.
But because we haven't actually built the ramp yet, we have to work with this split level in the backyard and get our materials in somehow. So this system's working well. And by keeping all the concrete moving downhill, we're using gravity to our advantage.
In the cold Montgomery rain.
We distribute the concrete evenly throughout our form system, so the concrete has time to settle as we add more concrete on top. This concrete will stay wet and active for quite a few hours, so we have enough time to keep the system moving and to keep what we call a wet pour, which adds a lot of extra strength to the finished dried concrete foundation system. This temporary box that I built for dumping the concrete in is working well.
Wait for you, that's all I ever seemed to do. Did everything you wanted to, now I'm done.
We're just using our shovel to get the concrete up to the rough height of our forms, and then later we'll be using our trowel to get a more exact level. All our timber forms for these foundations have been set at the exact level we want. So the idea is to get the concrete slightly underneath that level. So later when we connect the concrete block, we've got room for some mortar underneath it.
Shape my destiny to be the best of me.
I'll sting my claim right here where I stand.
We're very gently tapping in these pieces of rebar as we don't want to put them through the bottom of the concrete. The idea is for these rebar pieces to be suspended inside the concrete. When it dries, this is what's going to lock our concrete block into this system. We're using the same jig we used earlier that has preset marks on it, so we can line up the vertical rebar so it ends up in the middle of the holes of the concrete block. We just continue this process on all the sections of our form until all the concrete's in our system.
Take my hand, lead me to the promised land, where it's built to last, where the river runs. Soak my skin, cleanse the guilt I feel within. Promise everything, take me home.
Keep staring at the sign. I'm running out of time.
I'm doing everything that I can
To shape my destiny to be the best of me.
I'll stake my claim right here where I stand.
When your heart's done trying and your lungs run dry, there's nothing you can do when you can't deny. Every day ends up just the same in the cold Montgomery rain.
Pouring these concrete foundations is a lot of hard work, but it's also very satisfying as we've invested a lot of work in the preparation. All the excavation, the tree stump removal, digging the trenches, adding all our rebar steel, and finally we get to fill them with concrete.
Keep staring at the sign, but I'm running out of time.
I'm doing everything that I can.
This foundation has multiple levels as we're trying to come up the side of this hill. So when we're adding our concrete, we obviously start at the bottom and then move up to the higher forms as we fill the bottom forms. The concrete gels up enough to hold this concrete in place.
Nothing you can do when you can't deny. Every day ends up just the same in the cold Montgomery rain.
We just use our shovel and rake to keep the concrete moving through our foundation. And then we just work back from there.
In the cold Montgomery rain. In the cold Montgomery rain. In the cold Montgomery rain.
Once we've got one load of concrete settled into the foundation, we just repeat the system. We get another load and keep pushing it through until we've filled up our forms.
That's all I ever seemed to do. Did everything you wanted to, now I'm done.
I'm just working the trowel over this cement to get it smooth and flat in preparation for adding our vertical rebar pieces.
Wait for you, that's all I ever seemed to do. Did everything you wanted to, now I'm done. Take the wall you built a house hide behind it all. We're all fighting wars no one knows.
Keep staring at the sign, but I'm running out of time.
Doing everything that I can.
After a long day of pouring concrete, we're finally at the end of our pour. This last form is the highest form in the system, so once we've poured this out, we're going to be finished for the day.
When your heart's run dry and your lungs run dry, there's nothing you can do when you can't deny. Every day ends up just the same in the cold Montgomery rain.
That completes the first stage of our concrete pour. In our next episode, we'll be ripping the forms out from this concrete pour and preparing additional forms for the next stage of our foundation.
You just keep persisting and it'll all come apart.
Thanks for joining me this week on my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.